The Shanghai Cooperation Organization held its annual summit in Astana, Kazakhstan, and it was an incredibly successful meeting. Belarus was admitted as the next full member of what is now a 10-member organization. Remember, this started as a Shanghai Five 2 decades ago, and now it is 10 members, a full Shanghai Cooperation Organization that has not just what the original vision of this organization was, almost a security and mutual trust pact between China and the Caucasus region countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. Now it includes Iran, India, now Belarus. So do you see an emerging pattern here? I think it's quite clear that Russia and China are leading a multipolar organization that does have a heavy emphasis on defense. And I'm going to show you exactly why that's so important in a minute. But on the sidelines of the meeting on July 3rd, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met in Astana. They met on the sidelines. And here's what Xi Jinping had to say about the meeting. And this is a huge meeting because it's the second meeting in just a matter of months. These two meet an incredible amount. They are incredibly close, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. They call their relationship beyond friendship. And so they once again sent a pretty stern warning, a pretty stern message to NATO, to the collective West, to the United States hegemony and empire. So, and how did they do it? Well, they did it by continuing to strengthen their relationship and their leadership over the multipolar world. Xi urges China and Russia to continue strengthening alignment of development strategies. Chinese President Xi Jinping urged China and Russia to continue to strengthen development strategies and international strategic coordination alignment. Xi made the remarks when meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of the 24th meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Astana, Kazakhstan. He noted the successful state visit to China this May by Putin, so as I said, his second in a matter of months, saying the two sides are working together to make plans and arrangements for the future development of bilateral relations at a historical juncture of the 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. And here is where it's big. China supports Russia in fulfilling the responsibility as BRICS chair, uniting the global South, preventing a new Cold War, and opposing illegal unilateral sanctions and hegemonism. So that is the big message here, okay? And China is going to take over the rotating presidency of the SCO next, as they talk about mutual benefit, as they talk about mutual concerns, okay? He says that China always stands on the right side of history, adheres promoting peace talks, and is willing to continue to make positive efforts in the settlement of the Ukraine issue. So these two are on a mission to oppose unilateral hegemony and Cold War policies. And here's what Vladimir Putin had to say after the meeting between the two. Okay. He said, we are all happy to see you again. This is Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the SCO Summit. Allow me to start where we left off our last meeting, where you all welcomed us in China. I would like to thank you again for the hospitality you showed. We had very substantive talks, signed a joint policy statement, and launched cross years of culture. Later on, we visited Harbin. We had more opportunities to see the close historical ties between Russia and China. Back to this meeting and tomorrow's events. So they talk about Belarus becoming a full member, and repeatedly stated with good reason that Russia-China relations, our comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation, are going through the best period in history, guided by the principles of equality, mutual benefit, respect for each other's sovereignty, and the cooperation is not directed against anyone. They are not creating blocks or alliances. We are simply acting in the interest of our people. Now that is important, okay? They're acting in the interest of their people. Both Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin said this. And they talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in a very particular way in relation to their relationship. They talk about how they're both becoming leaders of this new multipolar order. They talk about how they're both confronting the same challenges and how they are truly seen as the leaders in confronting those challenges. So this is incredibly important because it demonstrates that how China and Russia, in fact, warn and send a message to the collective West is not by this is how many guns we have, this is how powerful we are military, we could wipe you off the map, we're going to go to war. No, they do the exact opposite. They say, we are going to show you how we can build the framework and infrastructure for a new world and how that cannot be stopped no matter what you do, because we are going to tackle all of the challenges together. Here is what China Daily had to say in an op-ed about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and how it exemplifies a new type of spirited international relations. So it's in the Shanghai spirit and a shared recognition of its goals and objectives that have knit together countries of different political systems, cultural traditions, and level of socioeconomic development in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The leaders of the member states signed and issued the Astana Declaration, presented the SCO initiative on countries uniting to promote a world of justice, harmony, and development, and suggestions on improving the SCO operating mechanism, and released a statement on the principles of good neighborliness, mutual trust, partnership, as well as a series of resolutions involving cooperation in areas such as energy investment and information security. The reason why the SCO has been able to withstand the test of ever-changing institutional situations, international situations, is that it's always adhered to solidarity and cooperation on equality and mutual benefit, upheld fairness and justice, and demonstrated broad-minded tolerance and encouraged mutual learning. As Xi Jinping pointed out, the SCO Summit, the organization was established at the turn of the century when the confrontation and division left over from the Cold War had yet to be bridged. The founding members of the SCO made a historic choice to pursue peaceful development, to commit to good neighborliness and friendship, and build a new type of international relations. Now the SCO is 26 countries in 3 continents, or at least covers it, right? Because there's observers. Okay, there's those who are not full member states. The world stands once again at a crossroads of history, and the SCO is on the right side of this history, on the side of fairness and justice, which is vitally important for this world. So in the face of a Cold War mentality, aka the United States, a real threat to global peace and stability, the SCO family maintains the bottom line of security. It therefore adheres to the practice set out in the Global Security Initiative of common, comprehensive, collaborative, sustainable security, responds to complex and intertwined security challenges through dialogue and cooperation, reacts to the profound adjustment of the international pattern of win-win cooperation. So what China is saying is, in a very Chinese way, is that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is very much about defense, but it's about defense in the interest of mutual cooperation, win-win development, and ultimately building mutual trust, not about going to war. But we have to understand that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is indeed about defending itself from the challenges of war. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about dollar dominance. Let's talk about financial and economic war like sanctions. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is speeding up de-dollarization, says Vladimir Putin. Now, Russia, which is the most sanctioned country in the world, is settling with fellow SCO members at 92% in their own respective currencies. What this means is that 92% of trade with SCO members is now in the currencies of the partners of the SCO, not the US dollar. So we have Putin saying the share of Russia's commercial transactions with members of the organization, the SCO, has already exceeded 92% in the first 4 months of this year. All of it without the US dollar, all of it in their national currency. So that is how the SCO is tackling the economic war in many respects. But it's also about security. So Belarus became the newest member, the 10th full member, right? Because there's observer status delegates. There's those who are up for membership. But you have Afghanistan who sits in. Belarus was added as a full member, and that's a huge deal. Why is it such a big deal? Well, let's look at the facts here. Belarus not only has been conducting joint nuclear drills with Vladimir Putin and Russia. It not only has been acting as an important ally in the war in Ukraine, but now, just days after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization met, you have Chinese military personnel arriving in Belarus for joint exercises. So this is a big deal because it shows that not only, so you have Russia just a few months ago solidifying its relationship with the DPRK, for example, right in so-called China's backyard. Russia has been moving closer to Asia Pacific countries, including the DPRK, which is a malign country, a country that's been at war for many years with the United States, at the threat of war with the United States, has had to go nuclear because of the United States, and has been sanctioned and isolated from the world economy because of the United States. And Russia said, well, we'll offer you an olive branch. We will help you get out of this situation and bring you into the multipolar fold, because that is what is in the best interest of Russia and the world. Now, China, as Belarus has been such a close partner of Russia in the conflict in Ukraine, now China is moving closer to Belarus militarily in ways that you wouldn't really have expected. So they've arrived for joint exercises as a Kiev independent, certainly not a friend of China or Russia. A group of Chinese army personnel, they say, arrived in Belarus on July 6th to participate in joint anti-terrorist training. The news comes days after Belarus, Moscow's key ally, joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by China and Russia. It focuses on Eurasian political, economic, security, and defense issues. The exercises aim to exchange experience, coordinate Belarusian and Chinese units, and create a foundation for the further development of Belarusian-Chinese relations in the field of joint training and troops. They will take place in Belarus on July 8th and 19th. Belarus has supported Russian aggression against Ukraine, but has not committed its own troops to fight directly in the war. So anyway, that's all we know so far. We know that there's going to be a military operation, a joint exercise, we should say. Maybe not a military operation, but a joint exercise between the two countries, which is a big deal. It shows that there is this coordination happening, that who's an ally of Russia is also an ally of China, who's an ally of China is also an ally of Russia. And so it's all becoming synergized. And that is really striking the fear of God into NATO and the United States at the head. So I wanted to show you now exactly how the United States and how NATO is responding to the strengthening of multilateral organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So what better place to do this than going to Foreign Policy Magazine, which is essentially the mouthpiece of the foreign policy establishment, really we call it think tankistan. It has a huge relationship with all the major Washington Beltway think tanks that help craft U.S. foreign policy. And here is what they had to say in the lead up to the NATO summit in July. Europe has a new role as U.S. strategy shifts to China. So at the NATO summit, we can expect, and by the time some of you see this, the summit will probably have come and gone. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I do think that it is quite clear that the NATO summit, like last year's NATO summit, will have a huge focus on China. And here is Joing Beckevold, a senior China fellow at the Norwegian Institute for Defense Studies, saying that Europe's new role is going to be the U.S. vassal in a war on China. The U.S. relationship will have several practical benefits for Washington's rivalry with Beijing. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I just want to show you exactly the mentality of what they're thinking. This is what they're trying to craft, the kind of Asia-NATO scenario. It's all about taking out China's influence in the multipolar world, because they understand that China's influence in shifting the global order is the most important in the world. As important as Russia is, it is China's ability to bring the economic weight behind the multipolar world, which just frightens the United States to such a degree. So the future of U.S.-European relations is emerging as one of the most significant factors that will shape the global system. So they're talking about, oh, Trump might win, but regardless, and that's bad for NATO's legitimacy. But regardless of who will hold the reins in Washington, U.S. grand strategy is in transition, adjusting from a U.S.-dominated unipolar system to a bipolar system defined by U.S.-China rivalry. In this new order, Europe suddenly finds itself in a geographic periphery of U.S. interests. Really? So this is the admission, right? The admission is that Europe is nothing but, right? Is nothing but a it's nothing but a ladder, right? I don't know. Anyone's a Game of Thrones fan out here, but when Littlefinger, right, he says chaos is a ladder. And that's exactly what Europe is seeing. Chaos in Europe, it's a ladder to what? To the U.S. War with China, getting Europe on board with it. So European leaders assessing the transatlantic relationship and Europe's role in it should get ready for a more realist-oriented U.S. grand strategy where the U.S.'s strategic footprint is likely to be thick in Asia and thin in Europe. Due to China's rise as a rival and peer competitor, a U.S. grand strategy of unipolar primacy is no longer an option. At the other end of the spectrum is possible strategies of isolation. A sudden shift of U.S. strategy to isolation would probably result in the dissolution of NATO, a radical transformation of transatlantic relations, and a potential instability of Europe. U.S. abandonment will leave behind a multipolar power structure within Europe. Germany, France, Britain, and perhaps Italy will act as regional powers along with Russia. No guarantee the European Union will continue to function. So all of this is kind of fear-mongering toward like a Trump vision of the world, which is not going to happen because Trump is not serious about enacting this. Neither are the right governments or whatever you want to call them that have come to power in places like France. All of this is just nonsense. But this is the real point here. An enduring element of U.S. grand strategy since the country's founding has been to preserve the dominance of its dominance, preserve its dominance in the Western Hemisphere and counter the rise of potential hegemons across its true transoceanic flanking regions in Europe and East Asia. Cold War, right? Soviet Union, China, now Russia and China. Between the two world wars, the United States followed a strategy of isolation, but this was because the balance of power in Europe and Asia at the time allowed it to do so. Today, Washington faces a different situation, regardless of what it does in Europe. Turning isolation in 2025 and withdrawing its forward military posture in East Asia would allow China to be a regional hegemon. No combination of Asian powers can balance China on its own. So they're talking about how now there needs to be a real concerted effort to contain China, but to do so with Europe. I mean, this is exactly right. Look, in the geopolitical landscape of U.S.-China rivalry, Europe is less significant to U.S. interests. And at the same time, increased polarization between Democrats and Republicans suggests that there might be a difference, Trump, blah, blah, blah. But Europe is going to occupy important roles in the U.S.-China war, right? This is the key crux of it. First, it's going to be a key defender of the U.S.-led international order, aka a vassal. So this is how this is what the United States thinks of Europe and thinks of NATO, really. Okay. Second, Europe is an industrial strong point in Washington's rivalry with Beijing. So basically, Europe will have to come into the economic fold with the United States in order to contain China. It will have to be taken away from China, essentially impoverish Europe in order to keep it away from China. And then this is the best one. The Europe is an enabler of U.S. power projection. I mean, an enabler of U.S. power projection. This is all that the United States thinks of Europe. And of course, what it really means is all of its European NATO vassals. It does so in three main ways. It's going to enable the United States to deter Russia, right? So even though Russia's military threat is secondary importance to the United States compared with the China challenge, Russia's nuclear arsenal, its dominant position in the Arctic close to the U.S. homeland, and Moscow's ability to influence developments in the Middle East and elsewhere indicate the U.S. interests are best served coordinating with Europe, aka dominating, controlling, and pushing Europe to fight its war against Russia. All right. So just on and on and on. Europe is an important staging area for U.S. deployments in the Middle East, Africa, Central and South Asia, as well as the Indian Ocean region, Suez Canal, on and on and on. And then Europe has a military role to play if the United States finds itself embroiled with China in a military conflict with East Asia. That role should not be to commit rather limited European naval assets to East Asian waters because these assets are needed at home to deter Russia. Short of a Pacific warfighting role, European navies could play a significant part in a naval blockade of China by helping to interdict China's seaborne trade through the Indian Ocean. In any protracted conflict with China, the United States is likely to impose economic sanctions and enforce a naval blockade to hurt Chinese imports of natural resources. The United States will need the full support of its allies. It's right there in Foreign Policy magazine. This is the trajectory of NATO, of the United States towards Europe. This is what it's going to push for at the NATO summit. And this is its response to the rise of multilateral organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Right? So that's where we are at when it comes to the multipolar world. You have on the one hand the di-unipolar order led by the United States, led by its NATO vassals. But you see, this relationship is not equal here. The United States is parading and leading by a ball and a chain Europe into its dirty wars on Russia and China. And it's looking at China as the head of the multipolar monster. It wants to chop its head off, but it cannot do that. So it's attempting to take out Russia first. Neither is working. This is all fantasy at the end of the day. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization just got much stronger with Belarus joining. BRICS is about to get much stronger when in October, Russia hosts the BRICS summit in Kazan. You can bet there will be many more members joining BRICS. The Belt and Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union, all these multilateral organizations are not getting weaker. They are getting stronger. This is the emerging multipolar world order. It is here now, and the United States cannot arrest it. But what they will do is they will continue to concoct more and more scenarios where the United States drags Europe, drags NATO into a war that they cannot win. That is what they will do. And why will they do that? Because they have nothing else. They have no other options. Look at how much detail Foreign Policy magazine put into an absolutely ridiculous scenario that would bankrupt Europe and destroy the global economy. Imagine all of that time with no consideration of the consequences. Europe needs China. China has an economy that is unsanctionable. Russia's economy has proven to be unsanctionable. And if Russia's economy is not able to be sanctioned successfully, what do you think is going to happen with China? We are already seeing it. I was just in China. I'm going back to China. I'll be there in August. What we are seeing is, if you go to China, we see China becoming more self-reliant and also embracing the world in a manner that is leaving the United States behind in every single area, from de-dollarization and independent financial mechanisms to development of new industries like high technology, renewable energy. Go to China, you will see all the renewable energy is there. They're not relying on the United States. When the United States says we're going to put 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, China will condemn it. But then they'll say, hey, we have a market. We have many markets. If you don't want them, we have the world that wants them. If the EU wants to go down your suicidal path with you, well, there's the rest of the world, right? There's the rest of the world. There's so many opportunities for the sale of these cars. And why is that? Because the Chinese government invests in them and allows them to thrive as an industry. And that's the case with all of China's burgeoning industries. That's why China's economy is successful, regardless of a slightly slower growth that the Western media cannot stop talking about. China continues to develop in areas that are critical to the future of this planet, and its leadership in the multipolar world is unquestionable, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be taken down by an Asian NATO. It's not going to be taken down by lofty and aggressive and hostile and belligerent statements by people like this former Norwegian diplomat in Foreign Policy magazine. None of this matters at the end of the day. because China has time on its side. China and Russia's partnership is just ironclad. It is better than any kind of friendship or bilateral relationship that we see in the world. It is the strongest and most important relationship bilaterally and multilaterally that we have in the world today. And that has only grown stronger after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. We are leading. Forget the NATO summit. Who cares what happens at that pointless meeting of warmongers? Now we have our eyes set on the BRICS summit in Kazan in October. That's only a few months away. And we are going to see the multipolar world accelerate continuously at a very steady pace. And that means this unipolar world order that we are living in, it is coming to an end. And that is something worth holding on to hope for.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.